Namaste. We thought in this particular session, we talk about the sutras, which are from 7 to 11, which talk about various vrittis. Earlier, Patanjali has given vrittayaha panchatayaha klishtaha klishtaha. There are 5 different types vritti goes on, and there are some of them which are supposed to be klishta, that means very knotted. Aklishtaha, they do not create any knots. But then vritti is something which we need to involve in the world outside. So every vritti cannot be something which is disturbing for us, but there are certain vrittis or certain types, certain activity as the one which binds us. And what are those activities which bind us are supposed to be klishta, and what are activities which do not find us is supposed to be aklishta. But basically, vritti is something which our activity is not. In fact, without vritti, you are not participating, you are not part of this world. The way that you are part of the world is through the vritti, through the activity. That is why the world is supposed to be action. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Nahi kashyat kshanamapi jato tishtatya akarma kruta kate vashak karma. It is something which we need to do it, need to get into the activity. Another very important aspect is that the way that we involved in the world outside is through the vritti. So therefore, Patanjali cannot label vritti is something which is very bad. Many times many translators have given this idea that vritti is bad. Vritti is not bad, but kleshas are the bad. Now, from the point of view that the activity emerges from within us in 2 different ways. So all that is supposed to be vritti. And what are these 2 different ways? One way is the activity which is directed outwardly, and the other is the direct activity which goes on inside. And for a person who just sits, observe himself, that's how the whole idea of yoga, it is contemplating on oneself. And you can see that the activities which are projected into the world outside, like for example, my seeing, my hearing, my touching, our talking, these are all supposed to be outwardly directed activities, which are generally called as the prana. And all that which is there in prana, it has been divided into 5 different prana because the type of activity it does. Like for example, a sinusoidal movement, the typical to and fro motion, day and night, all these things are supposed to be called as prana. An upward force is supposed to be udana, a downward force is supposed to be apana. Vyana is that which is radial, going out and then radially coming in. Like I touch something, the touching sensation goes inside radially and then it goes outside by saying that it's hot, take out your hand. Momentarily it happens. And this is what is Vyana. Something which balances within us is supposed to be Samana. There are not different pranas, these are all same prana, but based on different activities, they are classified as different things. Anyway, like that, there is another activity which is inward, and this is what he calls it as chitta. Roughly, we can call it in English as mind stuff. And the chitta has various activities that are going on inside. And one activity that directly, it starts from our interaction with the world outside, the senses through which that information flows in. And that information which is flowing inside is processed in the beginning, and this is supposed to be the mind which connects all these senses. Actually, there is nothing like a stuff called as mind. Even the senses are like opening, like windows. But then that windows have a filter that eyes only can see, ears can only hear. That's what is the filter that they have. But the information from outside flows through these senses inside into the central station where the activity goes on, which is supposed to be mind. And that activity, what we call it as thinking, there is nothing like mind at all. It is the thinking process that goes on. We call it as manas. So after that, once it goes inside, the information is completely analyzed and put into various pigeonholes and the categories and all that. All that activities, what we call that activity as buddhi, are called as intellect. This is a second type of activity which goes on inside. Like the way in prana, different activities are given different names of prana, the same way different type of activity that goes on inside are given different names like manas and buddhi. Buddhi, roughly translated as intellect. It has nothing to do with individual. It's only the information that you received. Then afterwards, what happens is that somebody who has to, information comes out like that, is there's a storing activity that goes on. That storing as activity, we call it as manas, buddhi, chitta. Chitta is that storing activity where all the information is there, you pick up. And mind, that means to say the thinking activity, picks up the information from there, matches with the information that you get, the process goes on. And that chitta is something where it's not basically an entity that's there, but it is something like an activity which is the storing and then expressing is the activity called as chitta. And who does all those things? There is some integration of all these things in one unit, and which is supposed to be ahankara. So therefore, this antakarana means basically, the karana means that where the activity is going on, and that antakarana is divided into 4 different types of activity: manasu, buddhi, chitta, ahankara. And then behind that is what is swarupa. That's why when Patanjali says that tatha drashtu swarupi avasthanam, means you stop all these activities belonging with the prana, de-identify yourself with that. It's all going on by its own. And similarly, the mind activity is going on its own, but then you are yourself rested in the pure consciousness inside. That is what is supposed to be the tatha drashtu swarupi avasthanam. You are that. The advantage of being that is that whenever that you want to use these activities, you use it. But when we don't use these activities, you can rest yourself into that, your own nature. And this is the idea, essentially, that what we call it as. Hello? Suprabhatam, ಅಮೃತ ಕೊಡ್ಬೇಕಾ? ಕೊಡ್ತೀನಿ. ಯಾ, ನಾನು ಕ್ಲಾಸಲ್ಲಿದ್ದೀನಿ, ಆಮೇಲೆ ಮಾಡ್ತೀನಿ. Hello? So therefore, supposed to be called as the vritti. Vritti basically means occupation. Vritti means activity that we do. Even the activity that you involve in the world outside is also called as vritti. Like that we call it as engineering is a vritti. The teacher is a vritti. Student is a vritti. That vrittis are there, and vrittis are something that we are supposed to do it. And we all carry different vrittis. Like, for example, I said, so different the vritti. Now, these vrittis are whatever that we are doing has 5 different kind of an activities at the chitta level. And this is what Patanjali says, that that's something that amazing that he has that capacity. And pramana means that whatever that really in front of you, that's what you see as pramana. And now pramana has all the activities that are going on can be divided into these 5 different kind of vrittis. Like, for example, there are several activities where we directly perceive, directly hear, directly respond to it. There is no intermediate agency behind that. This is what we normally do it. That is where it is a common thing that everybody does it. We all do that. But then that alone is not sufficient for our vrittis. We may see certain things, we may hear certain things, but at the same time, we may have to add some little more our own intelligence, our own memory, all those things, and then come to some conclusion. Either this is okay, not okay, this is right, this is not right, based on something which is not only whatever that we perceive, but something that we infer about that. Because every journey that we go into the future is something which is a journey into unknown. An unknown journey, then when we are doing, we don't think that everything has to be very clear in front of us, but it may be something that an unknown factor involves in the process. That's why the next level is where you try to infer certain things based on certain realities. But then that's also a wise thing. Everybody does it. And then the third is that many times what happens is that what you have may be very small little amount, but then what you have to infer is something which is much more larger. That means to say, what we call it as a vastu, the reality, may be very small little content, but then the rest of it, that a lot goes into assumptions behind it. So therefore, that pramana, viparya, vikalpa, and then there is another activity where when we go to sleep, when we are in the self-forgetful state, then everything goes into a shell, into a locked up state. And that's what is Nidra. Nidra is a state where all the impressions that are there, all the activities that are there, which are done by the senses, outside, inside, all those things are put into the locker. And then when we wake up, we come out of it. And then the last one is that where many times we have to work 100% based on only your memory. Your memory is there, and based on that, you take an action. Not that anything is bad or anything is good. But what happens is that as this situation is constantly undergoing a change, many times what happens is that the more and more that you have your assumptions and your speculations and all those things, they might go error. So when you see the pramana, which means basically the whatever that is there right in front of you, the error is seem to be the least. So go by pramana so that least error will be there. But where pramana alone cannot lead our life, therefore that we need to go further. All these different steps, they are necessary, unavoidable, but then the more and more that you go to the other steps, the less and less that, more and more that you're introducing the unknown factor into it. Therefore, we have to categorize what are the activities that are there, so that what happens is that where the pramana is there, that we give full value for that. But the more and more that we go inside, memory and all that, let's not give that value. That's a simple idea. And there can be error possible. You don't have to be really very rigid about that. This way that your working is there, but at the same time, you can make your work activity pleasant and non-burden on you. So let's look into what are the things that he gives in these particular sutras. He says that there are the 5 vrittis, he calls it pratyaksha, pramana, pratyaksha, pramana, viparya, vikalpa, nidra, smriti. These are the 5 different things. So let's look into it. Pramana also has various different things. One is that I see with my senses, I hear with my ears and all those things, and then naturally you come to an idea. But many times there are certain things which you might not have seen through your ears or eyes, but you have to depend upon some other sources also. That's why the first idea of pramana is pratyaksha. That means to directly your eyes. There is no agency between you and the object outside. You are not covered by any object any agency in between. You are directly observing the object, or you are hearing the thing. This is what is pratyaksha. And this is very simple, very strong. But only thing is that we need to also understand that there is an agency called I in between. There is an agency called ear in between. We don't know whether that agency also is playing tricks with you. Therefore, we have to be very careful. So therefore, in the pramana, in the real, actual in front of you, and out of this pramana, pratyaksha is supposed to be direct. But there also that your direct experience do not have any agency in between, and only one which does not have any agency in between is that you are the reality. And this is what is even Descartes also said, that anything else will fall by questioning, but then your being cannot be removed by any questioning, because basically it's an evidence based on your own being. That's all. So therefore, you are the pratyaksha. Your consciousness is a pratyaksha, or yourself, your atma is the pratyaksha. There is nothing like that. All other things are through the senses. Your senses, that means all the other things through the agency. And the agency can have its own influences. Like the way that somebody who has jaundice, his eyes will look at everything in yellow color. You have color blind, and that particular color is not there in front of you. If you do not have eyes, then you don't know the knowledge about light and the darkness. You have to depend upon other senses. So that means to that extent that your information is cut. So pratyaksha is only about yourself. The 100% sure is that you are there. And look at the irony that we 100% sure that we are there, but only thing is that we have never looked into who is this I. We have never questioned into that I. That's why this Patanjali Yoga Sutras, Patanjali's journey is something which is very important. So out of these pramana, the proof that is there, pratyaksha, with the eyes that you see or with the senses that you perceive directly yourself, no agency in between. And then second thing is anumana, agama pramanani. Anumana is that you infer. And that inference is also based on a lot of fact that's available, but at the same time. Like, for example, you see the smoke. Very often, this particular example is given from the Vedanta. The moment you see the smoke, that means to say that there is fire in that. The moment you see that the water is boiling, that means the heater is on. The heater has to be switched off. So that means to say, many times what happens is that heater does not even show up. Only thing is when water is boiling, then you will see that. So that means you have an anumana. This is like that. On various things like that. In fact, there's a very beautiful thing how this anumana inference will be wonderful. The great king Prithviraj, he was stranded in the forest, and Rana Pratap, he was stranded in the forest, and then his guru was also there, and then hungry, and he saw some beautiful fruits, and then said, would like to eat. And then immediately Guru said, no, don't eat that. First of all, you see that what the horse eats, that is something which is not poisonous. What a beautiful observation it is. So wherever a horse eats, then you go. If the fruits, horse do not touch it, that means it's not good for consumption. So that means to say your eyes see all those things, but you need to infer what is supposed to be something which is good for you. So therefore, pratyaksha is, pramana is direct, it's 100%. And then anumana, that means you infer, is something which is already with some little amount of judgment. And then third one is the agama pramanani. Agama is the books. Agama is the text which I have written. Particularly Agama Shastra, is the spiritual knowledge is something which very emphatically says that you are the consciousness. You are the base of the universe. Consciousness is the base of the universe. Again and again people said it. You might not have come across that. You might not know about it. Not only that, this concept that we are the consciousness, we are the base of the universe, again and again people said it. You might not have come across that. You might not know about it. Not only that, this concept that we are the consciousness, we are the base of the universe. Again and again people said it. You might not have come across that. You might not know about it. Not only that, this concept that we are the consciousness, we are the base of the universe, will only be known if you are in touch with your books. That's why these scriptures are very important, because they give you hint. They give you the idea that your consciousness, but they only give a hint. Your journey, you have to make it. So therefore, there's three different types of pramana. That means to say proof is available. One is the pratyaksha pramana, what you get through the senses. Second thing is anumana pramana, that you infer based on certain information that you get, a solid information that you have. And then agama pramana. Agama is something which is, the scriptures talk about it. You see somebody and he is having some nice, wonderful bindi on his head, and then and that lady must be having bindi and the kind of dress, then you can infer that it is supposed to be a Hindu lady, Hindu girl. So this anumana is something which is constantly occurring in our day-to-day life, without which we will not be able to do the vritti. But only thing is, anumana is only a certain degree. Somebody having bindi, you can say that he is a Hindu girl, but somebody may not be having a bindi, the mark that is there on the forehead. You don't know whether a Hindu or a Christian or Mohammedan or somebody else, because you see that there the range is wider. More wider is the range, the lesser is your strength of anumana. And agama, texts are something, when you look at it, there is an ocean. So therefore, we require somebody to guide us to what information that you go for. Particularly these days, there is so much of information in the world outside that you really do not know what is what. But we have to infer something, and agamas are the books that are there which will give us. So who do you approach? You do approach somebody who seemed to be a expert in that area. And expert, once again, you recognize by looking at inferring something like somebody with a stethoscope in his neck. Oh, he must be a doctor. So that means some symbol is there, some idea is there. Therefore, you infer anumana, and then you ask agamas. You search for it, you test for it. So therefore, all these three things are something which you hover in between. You keep going from one to the other and all that. But then until you are making sure that you have the pramana, you have the evidence for that. So this is what is anumana pramana. This is what is the pramana that we need to have it. And then pramana viparyaya. Viparyaya means basically that there is certain amount of information, but then you have to conjure into the future that these are the things, if I put together, necessarily this is going to happen. Way back, way later, somewhere like that you need to do it. Like, for example, this Olympics are going on and somebody has to work for Olympics. Yes, 1 year later, 1 year before, 2, 3 years before, start working with that, and then necessary work, all those things you do it, and finally we are able to make it into that. So therefore, let us look into what are the sutras that he talks about. Pratyaksha anumana agamanani pramanani. That's what is the 7th sutra. The right kind of knowledge are direct perception, inference, and scriptural testimony, agamanani. And viparyayo mithya jnanam atadrupa pratishtham. He says it is the wrong knowledge. I don't want to call it as wrong knowledge. It is viparyaya. And what is that viparyaya? Is the knowledge which is mithya jnanam atadrupa pratishtham. It is the false. You see the false, which is not reality, based upon the true nature of its object. A very simple idea is that the knowledge that is there outside that you see is false. But that false knowledge is based on something which is real. But then mithya jnanam atadrupa pratishtham. That means to say, we impose this kind of knowledge on the nature outside. And very major problem about that mithya jnanam or viparyaya is the idea that every day that people see that sun is rising and sun sets in the west. And it is all the time it appears from the plane of earth, then you see this is what is happening. In fact, even though that we know very well that it is not the sun which is going around the earth, but it is the earth which is going around the sun, but we still say sun rises and sun sets. See, even the usage of the words are also in that direction. So what is wrong about if somebody would have thought that this is the right kind of a knowledge, that it is the sun is the one who is going around the earth. So that's what is the poor fellow. Galileo said that it is the sun which is going around the earth, which is the earth going around, which is actually it is the church which said that it is the sun going around the earth. Because everybody sees that, everybody notices that. Are the people in the church, we are also supposed to be human beings, they have noticed the same thing. But what happened is that they have taken it to be truth. They have taken it to be reality. But then they have the authority. Whatever they say should be right. So naturally, what happened? When somebody really went into the experiment that and found out that it is not the sun which is going around the earth, but it is the earth which is going around the sun. Imagine what would have been, what would have happened to all these people who think that they are the custodians of the knowledge, custodians of information, because church is there in hand. So therefore they have persecuted people who have done like that. So viparyaya is something which can guide you. It is supposed to be wrong knowledge in that sense. Unless until somebody really probes, goes deep into it, tries to investigate into it, then he can reverse this particular knowledge. But look at the way, even till we know very clearly it is not the sun which is going around the earth, we always refer to a sunrise and sunset, because that has been like usage for us. In fact, way back in 16th century, this is when that Galileo has been persecuted for the reason that he said that the earth goes around the sun, not the sun going around the earth. What in 2000, the year of 2000, the head of the church said that apologized that after all, the church is wrong. What an unfortunate thing it is. That means not only places several things that are there, we should know that viparyaya is something which is not 100% true, but then there is an element of uncertainty that's there behind it, because it's not something which is real. So therefore, pramana viparyaya mithya jnanam atadrupa pratishta. Mithya jnanam, it's not ajnana, it's mithya jnana. Jnana is a knowledge. Whatever the pramana gives us the knowledge. But then ajnana is when we don't know about it is ajnana. But mithya jnana is dangerous. That means to say it appears to be the knowledge, and we see that we take that to be the knowledge and then proceed with that. This is what is mithya jnana. Dangerous. Ajnana is okay. Ajnana can be removed with the help of jnana. But mithya jnana is something, it's a false knowledge, but it is a false knowledge because it appears to be the knowledge. It appears to be the reality that is there. We have to realize this aspect of it. Then mithya jnana is taken away from the reality, and that, if we are careful about that, then we can understand that. So that means to say the reality that is there, plus there is so much of unreal thing that is attached with that. Earlier it is say 100% is the reality, that is 100% of the tathya, that is in Sanskrit we call it as tathya, that means what is there. But here it is say about 70% is what is there, but 30% is your own imagination or the wrong knowledge that you have given. Unfortunately, what happens with this mithya jnana is that though it is not a knowledge, but it gives a full indication that it is the knowledge. Because of so many other circumstances, this whole idea of institution of religion tries to brain to believe that this is the thing that is happening, just the way it is. And then you are caught up in that. How people get caught up in this mithya jnanam, that is viparya. Sometimes it happens that there is some very vague possibility that's there, but then we have taken it very seriously. Like the way that somebody is going for an exam and then a cat crossed this path. The cat doesn't know that you are going for an exam. But then this fellow puts these two things together wrongly, mithya jnanam. And he says, cat crossed my path, that is the reason why I failed the exam. Imagine the cat crossed your path and then you have failed an exam. and you, such a big person, cross the path of the cat, what will happen to cat? Have you ever thought about it? So this way, a lot of times mithya jnanam enters into our viparya, enters into the form of the beliefs in our system. We have to be very careful about that. Shabda jnana anupati vastu shunyaha vikalpaha. Vikalpa is more of an imagination. Shabda jnana anupati, that means to say that we have the knowledge of the Shabda anupati, that means we follow that, and vastu shunyaha, the object is not there. That means to say the reality does not exist, but all that what we have is some conjure, some information, that small little information is there, but your conclusion is so big. And that is supposed to be the Shabda Jnana Anupati, Vastu Shunya, and this is what is Vikalpa. And there is, it is called as Vikalpa. Vikalpa means that which is, Kalpa means it is creation. And Vikalpa is a wrong way creation, or a lot of creation is there, but a small little amount of the Vastu that is there. In fact, many times it happens like that, like the way that you see the mango seed looks alike. And then you would like to have an extraordinary, wonderful, sweet mango, Alfonso mango, and the seed does not give any information. And then you put that seed in the floor on the ground, and then nurture it, water it, and all that. 4, 5, 6 years later, it comes out with a crop. And the crop comes out is supposed to be a naughty mango, an ordinary mango. And you start wondering that I put this Alfonso mango seed, but what the naughty mango has come. This is where viparyo midhya jnana matad rupa pratishtam. Shabda jnana anupati vastu shunyaha vikalpaha. So it's only somebody said that it is supposed to be Alfonso mango, but otherwise the seed itself will not give any indication what it is like. So that means to say vastu shunyaha, the reality is not at all there. But then the information that you get from that you come out with that idea. So therefore, what happens is that a lot of faith, a lot of other things which come in. Therefore, when many times when we have come to this kind of a situation, that the reality is only about 30%, and then 70% is non-real, but it's not that something which is bad, but that's how the things work. Without somebody saying that this is so and so, I will not proceed further. A journey into the unknown will not take place at all. There are some people who are afraid of anybody says anything. They don't want to believe that. And those people cannot do anything. They do not proceed further at all. But then we are not like that. We would like to proceed. Therefore, somebody gives you a neem tree seed and says this is a mango seed. And that also will not work, because there, even to imagine that it is supposed to be the mango, Alfonso mango, first of all, at least there is some reality should be there. That 30% of the reality should be there. Only 70% of the imagination that we put on that, and then therefore the risk is about 70%. And similarly, abhava pratyalambana vritti nidraha. Nidra is where pratyaya alambana, objective world, alambana, association with that, abhava, it's not there. Nidra is a state where nothing from the outside, nothing from your imagination, your memory, or your dreaming, nothing is there. You are just peaceful. So that means to say, outside is also zero, inside is also zero. That's what the vritti called as nidra. And we need to get into that state, rest mind. But then why is it called as vritti? The simple reason is that all that impression that are there in the mind, all the activities, it goes into the cold storage in the sleep state. You need that rest. And then when you wake up, all these activities will come up dormant, which was there. Like the way that when the winter comes, When the fall comes and after that winter comes, you see that all the plants, everything goes into the dead, almost like there is nothing. All that what you see is the snow covered land. But then the moment that the spring comes up, you see how many ways that everything comes up. The whole land becomes green. The flowers start flowering. Everything comes up as if somebody has given an order for them to wake up and then start going. So that what happened to all these things? Where were they? They were in the seed form. In fact, this same analogy is used seed form, and that's what is black hole. Comes back again on spring springs up. The whole creation takes place. What brings the creation is that so this is what is nidra. Nidra is an outside form. That's why it is called as abhava pratyaya alamba. The smriti is the case where Vishaya is their object outside, and Anubhuta, that means the way that every Vishaya, every object that is there outside, and then object comes and goes away, doesn't make any impression, any dent on you. But then the object that are given impressions on you, you feel it inside. So this is what is called as Smriti. And this Smriti can be there in different levels, in different layers. And we all know that. Like, for example, certain things which we keep them so deeply in our memory, they're certain to the right memory. Like somebody else's name, you might not take it to very deep layers. Immediately, we may not keep deep inside. And then later on, somebody, particularly some people who are not verbal, and they don't remember their names. And later on, say a month later, that and say, so and so came to meet you. I don't know whether he met me or not. A few incidents are all said. And said, oh, then you remember, oh, that person, yes, I met him. Which means basically that name was there somewhere deep inside. Recollection of various associated things will bring about that name. Whereas your name is something which you go deep inside. That's the reason why we keep that name. If you hear that name again and again, people call. So therefore, that name strikes in us. That's why in a room there are 10 people who are sleeping nicely, and somebody comes there and calls your name. Others may not hear, but you hear. You wake up because that when he called, it touched your deeper cores. Because that your name is again and again called. This is what is Smriti. At a deeper layers. Smriti itself is in deep layers. In fact, that's one of the reasons why this is a very beautiful situation you can find in our Sanatana Dharma culture. They say that when the child is born, looking at various planetary conditions and all those things, they give you, these are the letters on which that your name has to be there. Based on those letters. So they find out the name. The naming ceremony is actually that. I remember very well when our granddaughter was born at that time, we went to these Jyotisha, said that, look, you give a name which has got these letters. Then what is the logic behind it? When we ask that, very simple thing is that when these two letters fall in her ears repeatedly again and again, that shapes her character. The name shapes the character. How beautiful it is. That means those letters are very important. They go deep into you. And the letters are associated with that. When Rama was born, and that is what the Rishi said, that he should have these two letters, Ra and Ma. These are supposed to be the letters which are connected with the life. These are called as the Jiva letters. And what is that? Particularly for the spiritual personality. Why it is like that? Because these through mantras, which are supposed to be the most powerful mantras, Panchakshari and Ashtakshari, and with these two mantras, the Jiva Shabda in that is that, like Om Namo Narayanaya. This is what is the name of Lord Vishnu. And there you see that Ra is supposed to be Jiva Shabda in that. You remove that Ra, Om Namo Nayanaya, it doesn't make any sense. So Narayanaya. Ra becomes like an emphatic letter in that. Similarly, when you go to Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Ma becomes like a Jiva letter. Nashivaya, when you say that, even the rejecting of the Shiva, that's what is the Jiva letter. So both these things are together becomes Rama. This is what from this culture that we have. So you have to listen to that name again and again. If you have not listened to that name, you don't even have that name in your memory. Like the way that Edison was a very great scientist, and his name is Thomas Alva Edison. It's a wonderful name. But then because that he was a scientist working in the lab, he was always called as professor. Nobody called him by name Edison. And during those days that there was, ration shop, where he went and gave his card, and looking at the newspaper, there were so many other people who were there. When his name came, that they made an announcement, Edison, Thomas Edison. And he continued to read the newspaper. He did not hear. Or maybe it fell into his ear, but it did not make any sense to him. Somebody who heard that, he said, hey, I had seen Edison was here. And he looked at Edison is here. Then he came to him and tapped him and said that your name is called. Edison said, no, it's somebody's name is announced. It is Edison's name. I said, you are Edison, professor. We call you professor, but you are Edison. Oh, right. Then he forgot his own name. Then he went there. So this name becomes so important, and it goes deep into our memory. Our name in this life is something which goes deep into our memory. That's one of the reasons when somebody is sick, somebody who is very close to him or her, and they ask them to go and near his ear and call him by what that he is familiar with. If the son is familiar with that, Appa, he calls, and then he opens his eyes, looks at it. Or a friend is there, he says, when he calls his voice, then it goes deep into him. It's not just only the name, even the voice goes into the memory. And Indian philosophy says, not only these things, there are several things which we take it, such deep memory, life after life it goes. And that memory is something which brings us back into this life. In fact, one such thing, very clearly, later on we get this idea in Patanjali Yoga Sutras, is the idea of fear of death. In so many generations that we have gone through that fear of death, it is imprinted in us. So fear of death is something which is there deep within us. So when you look at it, all your activities is spanned between pramana, viparya, vikalpa, nidra, smriti. All these things are there. And when you look at it, pramana is 100% outside. Viparya is where that 70%, I'm not exactly saying this. Numbers are not important. The proportion is very important. 70 outside, 30 inside. That means inside means your own imagination. Vikalpa is where 30 is outside, 70 is your imagination. Nidra is 0 outside, 0 inside. Smriti is 100% inside. This is the beauty of Patanjali, that he puts everything in the form of such gradation and in the order. Because he puts these things in order, later on you can see the way that he works out also in an orderly way. Samadhi states he works out in an orderly way. Like for example, sampragnata to asampragnata, there also when he goes in that orderly way. And that's what is basically the order that he created in the form of what is called as vitarka, vichara, ananda, asmita. There is an orderly way. Later on, in the second chapter, it comes with the kleshas. And kleshas also in an orderly way that he brings about. Beauty of Patanjali, scientific accuracy of Patanjali is the one which makes the things to be in such a orderly way that he presents the whole thing. Interaction, there is so much of an orderliness. So these sutras will give us the idea of orderly, that our vrittis are planned. And not only that, I would like to re-emphasize, which I already said, that nothing is bad in that. But as I said that 30% and 70%, when you go deeper and deeper into our memory, there are more possibilities of error. because it takes you away from the reality. When you are working with the smriti alone, there is no reality outside. Then you are prone to a lot of error. And if we know that, if we realize that, then we see that I don't depend upon this thing which is prone to error so much. I go into the reality. Like, for example, I have seen something. If somebody has seen something, I have not heard, I have not seen that. Like, for example, it rained in Bangalore. I have not seen, I'm not there. Only thing is that from Bangalore, newspaper comes and then I see that. I'm living in Mysore. But somebody from Bangalore comes and says that, yeah, it is raining. Our phone, he says, now it is raining outside. He says, no, it's not raining because in the newspaper it is not given. It's raining. Newspaper might not have given. But then somebody who has seen is something which is more direct. So give value for that. Don't insist that you are right. Take it easy. So this way, when we do that, we have this clarity that are we closer to pramana or are we closer to smriti? Then we can realize that when we are closer to smriti, we don't have to insist on that 100%. When we are closer to pramana, yes, we have to take it. But I said also one more thing, that even pramana can err because the sensory organ that is involved in that might give a wrong information, wrong notion. It is said that legendary story is a very beautiful story, but then story itself, that's all. Let's not give a reality to that. But then story is something which is beautiful. Wherever Rama's story goes on, Hanuman is always there. That's why it is said that in Ramcharitmanas also, Yatra Yatra Raghunatha Kirtanam Tatra Tatra Kruta Mastakanjalim, with the devotion that is there, because he loves Rama. He goes there and stays in some form or the other to listen to the story of Rama. So Ramdas is giving the story of Rama, supposed to be very popular, very famous. And then Hanuman is staying there, is there sitting as a Brahmin in the audience. And in ecstasy was swinging by Rama's story. That's what he is. And while particularly the episode comes connected with Hanuman, what can you say about Hanuman? He's so ecstatic. While saying that, Ramdas says that Hanuman went to Ashokavana and then he saw the white flowers that are there. Immediately, this Brahmin got up and said that, no, they are not white flowers, they're red flowers. Ramdas got shocked. He said, look, they're white flowers, listen to it, just sit down. Let's not dispute on this. White flowers. No, they're red flowers, I insist on that. Arey, you are telling the story, I'm telling the story, I'm telling the story, so you listen. Everybody is also curious why this man is insisting on that. Then Ramdas said, no, they are white flowers only. You shut up and sit down. But then he said, no, you are wrong, they are red flowers. How do you know that? Arey, this is what I've been telling in Ramayana. But how do you know it? He said, I am Hanuman. Wow, everybody was surprised because that Hanuman was there. It was Hanuman. Yes, I've seen with my eyes. Then Ramdas says, you may be Hanuman. I don't care for it. But then they are white flowers. They are not red flowers. Now this is almost like a riddle. Unsolvable riddle. Only let's go to Rama to find a solution. And then they went to Rama. And they asked Hanuman with that agitation. He said, look, this man is saying all wrong. He said that I've seen the white flowers, but I've actually seen red flowers. Rama smiles and says, no, they are white flowers. I'm the person who has seen, and you also dispute that. Rama replies saying that, Hanuman, you are so angry with Ravan because he has taken away Sita. Your eyes are filled with anger. And through that anger, when you look at anything, it looks red, blood red. So that's why you're looking at them as red flowers, but they are white flowers. What an amusing story. And we need to lesson from this. How many times that we look at people tainted by our information that's there from the memory, our information of a wrong conclusion that we have created. That Pramana can also be smeared with something which is not real. When we understand this, then the vritti becomes easy, gentle, soft. You can understand that. You can relate with that. You can handle that. Ultimately, the idea is that the vritti that you get caught up is supposed to be klesha, and vritti which makes you to flow freely. Like the way an object that is there in front of the mirror, it reflects. But the moment object moves, the mirror does not hold on to that. A child is like that. And this is what is the reason why we need to understand vrittis very clearly. And Patanjali is a great master who gives us this beautiful insight. And now we need to get out of it. One thing is that consciously that we know that. And second thing is we should have an ability to move on. And these two things are given in the sutra called as Abhyasa Vairagyabhyam Tannirodha. That vrittis you leave behind and move ahead can only be possible by these two things. One is Vairagya and the other is Abhyasa. Vairagya means let go. A mirror lets go. You also let go the vrittis. Abhyasa means that we need to have a constant practice of able to let go. This is the kind of a thing. These vrittis are Nirodha can happen by means of practice and non-attachment. That's what is the next sutra. We'll stop it here. We'll continue with the 12th sutra in some other time. Thank you. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.